Hello friends, my name is Beth Korth and I'm the Art Education Coordinator and Visitor Center Manager here at Tippet Rise Art Center, located in Fishtail, Montana. Today I'm here under Xylem by architect Francis Carey, who built this pavilion as a unique place to sit and look at the world around us. Today we'll be taking one step further with our outdoor drawings and starting to block in our paintings. If you have not already drawn an outdoor scene, please check out our previous video about drawing outdoors. Now let's go under the canopy and learn how to start blocking our painting. Today you're going to need a pencil. Make sure it's nice and sharp and has a good eraser on it. You're also going to need a pencil sharpener to keep your pencil sharp throughout the session. You'll need a medium round paintbrush to paint with. And then it's great to have a travel watercolor set. It's especially nice if it has a little lid. And then make sure you have plenty of pigments ready to go. Now you'll also need, of course, your mini portfolio with some extra paper sandwiched in between and your drawing already clipped to the front, ready to be painted on. Finally, you're going to need a little bit of water to go. I like to carry it around in a mason jar with a nice little lid. Makes it easy to travel. Once you have your drawing all set, you'll definitely have a clearer understanding of your foreground, middle ground, and background. And now it's important to look back at your scene and start to take in some of the colors that you're seeing. You might notice that some of the colors that are brighter and crisper are going to be part of your foreground in the objects closest to you, while objects further away are going to seem a little bit more dull and also have an overall bluer sense. Once you have your drawing completed, you'll have a clear understanding of your middle ground, foreground, and background objects, which will help us as we start to add color with our watercolors. Now, as you may already have noticed, the crisper and brighter colors are part of your foreground in the objects closest to you. And you may also have noticed that the objects furthest away from you seem to be a little bit more duller and also have an overall bluer sense. This is atmospheric perspective, whereas all of the air and the water in the air in between us and those objects far away start to create that bluish water-like tint in things that are farthest away. So as we start to bring in some of our colors into our objects, we'll think about them again as those larger foreground, middle ground, and background shapes, ignoring some of our details for now. So as we go in, let's start by bringing an overall blue tint to our background. Now, as you know, a lot of things in our background actually are not blue, but they do have that overall blue tint. So just going ahead and starting with that color can be really useful as we start to create our layers in our painting. Now again, we're adding this very light blue tint to our entire background scene. We're using a lot of water initially and really spreading that pigment out. And that's just going to be a nice light wash. You really want to let your watercolor dry in between layers. So as we're letting that background color dry, we can start to look to our middle ground. So as we look into our middle ground, that's most of those hanging pools in the Xylem sculpture. And so I think a nice general sense for that one is going to be a nice yellow. Again, we're using a lot of water in our initial layers and just bringing in a little bit of pigment just to give that overall wash and color. And as we move into our foreground, those are the objects closest to us. Again, that's still part of the Xylem. And so I think we're going to bring in a yellow, but just with a little bit more pigment so that it's a lot brighter. We want to make sure that we are letting each layer dry before moving on to the next one. That way our colors don't cling together and become muddled, especially when we're using a lot of water initially. So of course we're outside, so it's pretty fast to let things air dry. If you find that you've added a little too much pigment, it's really easy just to push it back by adding a little bit more water into your watercolor and spreading it out with the bristles of your brush. Remember, this is pretty tough paper. This is a watercolor paper, so it can be a little bit tougher on it. It's not going to hurt it too bad. And again, just let it dry completely before adding your next layer so that they don't blend on your paper and start to muddle each other. Once you have your initial wash on there, what you're going to want to do is start to block in those more specific colors and tones that relate to the objects that you're seeing. Now, as we look again to our background, there is some foliage, and that general color is going to come out a little bit green. So we're going to select a pretty light green, just because, again, because it's in our foreground, or excuse me, in our background, object furthest from us, it's just not going to hold as much pigment in our eyes and just come off a lot lighter than what's closest to us. Once you have those general shapes in your background blocked in, you can move on to your middle ground. Again, that's going to be those hanging structures on xylem, painting each one individually with a different, a little bit brighter hue of yellow. And maybe as we're looking at it, you can see the structure, the long part of the poles are a little bit darker. So we're giving those a little bit of a darker yellow tan color versus the flat components, which hang straight down, are going to have a little bit of a lighter block in on them. Again, it's really important to let your layers dry completely. This is going to give you a nice crisp sort of edge to all of your blocking, and that's going to help some objects look nice and sharp and a little bit closer to us versus the objects in our background. You may want to go back with a nice wet wash to make them a little bit fuzzier. Again, that fuzzier, less specific, duller pigment is what's going to push those objects in our eye back away from us. And those crisper, brighter pigments and more specific information are what's going to bring things forward to us in our drawing and painting. All right, now as we move on to our foreground and our painting, again, we want to use some of our brightest colors. Even as you look at an object in real life, you may find that it's not super bright, but what's really great about watercolor is you can really push those colors that you're seeing. So if you feel like you see a little bit of purple in that shadow, or you see a little bit of, you know, a pop of red or something, don't be afraid to go for it in your watercolor. It's amazing what the viewer's eye will do with your painting to start to fill in some of those gaps, and how much of those colors are actually there that our eyes are picking up. And even when you pop something a little strongly in a watercolor, as it dries, it will dull a little bit. So remember, everything you're painting, it might seem ultra vibrant and too bright, but remember, as it air dries, it will kind of come down a few notches as well. So again, just breaking down your objects in your foreground, those objects closest to you, and start to block in those entire shapes. And then really think about how to break down those objects even further. Keep on adding more and more layers to your painting, slowly moving away from your background. Remember, you should do the least amount of work onto your background, leaving it a little bit fuzzier, a little bit duller, and then ending with those final layers that are going to be part of your foreground. A lot of what drawing outside or painting outside is about is having those very personal experiences, these little moments that no one really knows about except for you. So don't be afraid to try new things in your paintings. Remember to stay hydrated as you're outside and painting. We hope that you have a lot of fun and you keep on painting out there. Thanks for watching. For more videos, check out our YouTube channel. For more information about Tippet Rise Art Center, go to www.tippetrise.org.